Greetings, greetings. We are back. Welcome back to my Poet Podcast. I am your host, Alex Murdoch. Hope you're all doing well today. You know, just trying to get frisky with it, as we do. Obviously that didn't last too long. But great to be here, man. Hope everybody's doing well, and I'm doing well myself. Thanks for asking. And it's been a good day. It's been a good week. It's been a good year. And we're just keeping the vibe going, but positive vibes. And I'm Alex Murdoch, the Mad Poet, and yes, a few things to unpack, but I'm here with a guy to, to follow me down these crazy roads, Mr. Strings Theory.
How you doing, bro?
Follow his podcast as well. So his channel. I'm sure his podcast will come soon, but follow his channel. What's going on, Strings?
Good, man. Winter arc. That's where we're headed. That's the word of the day. Winter arc, man.
Indeed.
Yeah.
All right. You want to hear what it's all about today? What I wanted to query about. I have a quote for you. And obviously, we spoke about this last week where, there was so much to unpack. I thought to myself, you're right. We should sort of visit this, but perhaps from a different angle, hence the title. But I wanted to share you the quote. The same thing. And I would recommend you check this. I'll send you the link.
Please.
I would recommend you check out the article I've been reading. Very intriguing in there. Let's go over the quote.
One sec, bro. Your signal's going up and down.
Let me know when it's okay.
Yeah. I think it's
all good?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the quote. I tried to cut it. I don't want to be too long-winded, but it says, even theology tells us that faith is supported by facts that even historically perceptible in this known world of ours, namely that Christ was born as a real human being, worked many miracles and suffered his fate, died under Pontius Pilate, I forgot the name right, and rose up in the flesh after his death. Theology rejects any tendency to take the statements of its earliest records as written myths and accordingly to understand them symbolically. Indeed, it is the theologians themselves who have recently made the attempt, no doubt as a concession to knowledge, to demythologize the object of their faith while drawing the line quite arbitrarily at the crucial points. Did you catch that? You go on mute. Unmute yourself.
Yeah, the last bit, please.
You said the last bit?
Yeah.
Where was it? From Indeed, it says, indeed, it is the theologians themselves who have recently made the attempt, no doubt as a concession to knowledge, to demythologize the object of their faith while drawing the line quite arbitrarily at the crucial points. Maybe I add a little bit more to it. But the crucial intellect is only too obvious that myth is an integral component of all religions and therefore cannot be excluded from the assertion of faith without injuring them.
Injuring them, probably meaning the masses. But yeah, no, amazing quote. Can't wait to get into it.
Yeah.
But the first line grabs me. No, he was gonna say something.
Yeah, let me just share a piece. Have a stick a pin in that. Let me share a quote for today. Is the quote for today. Titanium braces with rubber cushions. A thought came like a thief in the night. No longer happiness, only finding solace where pain resides. Feeding my mouth grip, a tight fit, have me bleeding profusely. A mind trick to have my guard cramping, only to expose the many shortcomings of my design. I wish to fight, thus I carry on in a tantrum, in hopes one day my temperament may take flight. Extreme lives, sorry, let me say that again. Extreme lives in my defenses, ambitions to be relentless, driven by my driven by the scars I thought I forgot, yet they stood strong, but no longer shining with meaning. That's the quote for today.
Really ties into, you know what's funny? Even if you just went straight in with your piece from the quote, I would have thought it was like,
Yeah,
bro.
you know, normally that's what I do, but I kind of got it. I was in a rush. I kind of got it mixed up.
No,
Um,
all good. I think, yeah, always appreciate you finding your works
all
to
right,
match.
let me explain. Let me explain my chain of thought. You know why all this is relevant. I think the piece somewhat is self-explanatory, but the quote itself, because obviously I have context because I've read it. The idea behind what he's the idea that he's portraying is that there is somewhat a distance or a disparity between knowledge and faith. However, the quote I read to you is basically him expressing that it's folly. It's a folly thing to somewhat attain or to go towards because you can't explain faith without knowledge and vice versa. It's tricky. It's somewhat of a paradox. Do you understand?
Yes,
You know what I mean?
absolutely.
So this is the issue we're having, and it's somewhat, from what I gather, is somewhat it's sort of like a microcosm of society as a whole in reflection of today's modernized state sort of thing. And it's somewhat portraying a situation we're having, thereby causing um, sub well unconscious situations for people, and it's only people that have the tools to somewhat figure things out for themselves using logic or faith or bridging that gap that can remain steadfast and not be disturbed in a sense. um, so this is the issue. So my idea was somewhat to perhaps explore this, you know um, but in a way where we're thinking knowledge versus faith. And in particular, the reason why I wanted to, share the quote, especially the example that you use pertaining to religion is, we know in the Bible there's a lot of symbolism used. I mean,
Absolutely.
that's the, the number one language of old school people anyway.
Mm,
Symbolism. Even now, like you talk to them, it's just like, that's a symbol.
mm,
I mean, Farrakhan states symbol all the time, old school.
mm.
And the Bible is like a dictionary of symbolism. However, at the same time, there is a tendency of modernized society to somewhat factualize symbols or stories in the Bible to somewhat to make them to kind of extract them out of the ideals of being merely fiction that gives tales of lessons, tales with lessons, so you can learn from, so you can extract things to make you a better person.
Yeah.
And in doing so, there is a somewhat draconic situation. Um, it can be chaotic for certain people. Um, the one word that he did use that I think fits this thing is nihilistic in the idea that we live in a world where people are in serious need of something to believe in, and sometimes when you have these separations, as we call it, between knowledge and faith, there is a the disparity causes distancing or alienation because you don't know, you either, in a sense where you either grow closer to it to the point of disregarding all your logic, and sometimes some people be like, just believe.
Mm.
So you either go closer to it
Mm-hmm.
regarding logic, or you distance yourself because it just doesn't make any sense. The symbols, because what you have is people saying, "Oh, it's facts," but how is this part of facts? How are these things factual if it's supposed to be aligned with logic as well? And so this is the idea that came to mind with this topic.
Right.
You know, um, logic versus knowledge, which is so tricky, especially in the day we live in. So this is, I think, these are some of the issues. And if you broad stroke it now,
Mm.
thinking about just things in general, where it's spun and the narratives are somewhat mutated to be something that is unrelatable, especially for younger generations that don't necessarily relate or can connect to a lot of these language because it's so far distanced,
Mm.
because the world has changed so much, and these are such archaic verbiage that have been spun for so long. But we live in an age of really, really being new and new and new. But the ideals are not modernized enough. It's not converted enough to something that they can relate to. And so the faith, even the logic, I would say, is somewhat, it's not updated enough where they can really relate to it. So I think this is the problem that we have, it's the problem that we have.
Mm.
You even think about certain situations to do with, I mean, you know, you watch horror movies all the time, like, you know, the werewolves and all these type of things that are supposed to be myths and all these things. But you know, there are people out there that believe in these things as well. You know that they actually, you know. But again, and this is the disparity I'm talking about, because it's like the lines are blurred, where myths don't stay myths and logic don't stay just logic, or there's not a balance between the two where you can kind of decipher where you fit, what fits, what don't, and it's not supposed to fit. It is supposed to fit. Do you get what I mean? And so this is the disparity that we're speaking about, where the narrative is so is spun in such a way that um, people are at a disadvantage, and so they're losing faith in these things that want people to sort of strive to live and be better. You know, so does that make sense? Do you want to touch on it?
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
let
yeah, for
I'll let you
sure.
speak.
There's a lot that you said, and I was saying earlier, just before you shared your thoughts, that yeah, this quote is a great segment from last week. So yeah, if you could put that in the chat, because there's a lot I would like to pick apart. But from what I'd say from what you're saying, just to summarize, and then we go into it. Yeah, definitely. Um,
Keep talking. I'll put it in the chat while
yeah,
you talk.
thank you. I think the first thing is knowledge. Like we say, I'm gonna make that a staple for everyone that's part of this platform. Knowledge isn't free, so the older and the more richer the knowledge, a price must be paid, and it's hard to separate the instant gratification that we have in today with the answers that are easy to attain. It loses its value. And I was having a conversation a few weeks ago where I think I might be the last or second to last generation where you had to really be taught how to find information, find out if it's credible, know the importance of reading, checking your sources, because what could come with that not being part of the principle is that false information can be very, let's say, deadly. Because, and now it's business. What's the term? Clickbait. That probably wasn't around before. But now, and I saw some YouTubers explaining how they have these algorithms or AI assistant tools to help them create the most enticing thumbnails on channels for them to get people to distract them. And it's very, very effective because offering people of a particular way of thinking or the lack of strength in thinking to just say, here's what's the word? Here's a takeaway meal on information or what's going on right now. And we're seeing the effects of it very consistently. So if you tie that to faith now, everyone's like, "What? Hold on a minute! Like, what do you mean? Um, I have to believe in something that ties to how I feel about how the world works, um, and it's spread around like our daily conversation. I remember saying in one of my reviews about sinners that times like bad energy stay far away is rooted in being aware of how to manage your energy, um, specifically for it not to be tainted. But that comes with extensive research and practice from different generations of cultures and societies as to why you must be more than aware of how to do these things. Um, and with practices in our own homes, the ones I love that are passed down without even thinking are if you're sick, your mom will make this, or try this remedy. And it tends to work without you questioning it, simply because there's enough belief in that with the knowledge of how it works to some extent and your culture where it usually does its job. But like you said, the separation starts to cause a massive rift because um, information starts to lose its value. If it's readily available, no matter who's sharing it, it would just make people say, you know what, I'm a know it all, or why do I need to find anything past this? And that's the danger of it. It's like, what's the term? Um, s- People that sell snake oil. So it will give people a false and a larger sense of entitlement with knowledge, which, when not carefully earned, it can be wielded as a weapon that can be very destructive. So, uh, but what people will think is it's not only to others, but it's more damaging to yourself because now when you are faced in moments of a crisis or a character revealing moment, your foundation of knowledge of self will be very, very surface level, and you will crumble and you will fall to anything that will give you an immediate sense of relief, and it will cost you immediately and down the line because now when I remember saying last week, when you're at another stage in your life where you're shown to whether make or break with building up that self-confidence in yourself, it will be like, oh, I'm going to go back to that thing or that thought pattern that helped me get out of it last time. And then lo and behold, sooner or later, that foundation you're building yourself will turn into glass and it will shatter. And I think there's going to be a massive epidemic of the effects of um, this type of information accessibility and what that does to your inner foundation. Yeah, I can't wait to see the studies because I'm still eager to see the extent of what that does to people. But yeah, that's my take for now.
It's interesting you say about things being rejected or somewhat the lines being so blurred, whether that's through scrutinism or just the ultimate skeptics out there. But it's so manipulated and coerced that I think that's the problem where there's a mutative feel about things that where it lacks originality. And obviously, the one thing that I think people have always liked about facts is the fact that is the purity of it, where you know what, it can't be coerced or turned into something than what it is. And that's the problem we have with a lot of these narratives being spun is the mutation of the factual, the coercion of evidence, the tweak and the change of reality. Ultimately, if you can change facts, then ultimately you are changing reality. And this is something that I can't help but sense that, because at the end of the day, where does this stop? Where do you draw the line? Because ultimately, what you're looking at by right is that there is no line. In which case, anybody can decide what facts are. I mean, isn't that what the whole term of misinformation is about? When you can change reality or change facts ultimately to somewhat pick and choose what it's supposed to be for you, thereby, and then you broad stroke it into society, as in, now you need to hang on to this, you need to swallow this, you need to be this because it makes me feel better. It makes me feel whole. The fact that this is my comfort zone. And now I have to live through your prism so that you can feel okay. You can feel like you're living, despite the fact that I'm not living for me anymore, as long as you're okay. Juxtaposing now to the ultimate bigger picture that we were speaking about last week, you know, the larger society and the one mass that is the population. Going back to the idea that the state population is one because we all have this same perception on what is the narrative, whether it be political, religious, or a creed. We all think the same thoughts, just like we all breathe the same air, so essentially. And ultimately, we are somewhat of a one big robot or one big human, as opposed to many individuals with our own thoughts, our own opinions, our own chain of thought to express what we think about the world, not necessarily what the state thinks about the world, because ultimately that's who you're speaking for. If you're one person, there has to be a control. There has to be, um, I mean, in Alice in Wonderland, there was the wizard. There has to be a wizard. There has to be somebody pulling the strings, and ultimately, that's the head of state. I would imagine to be pulling the strings. So, I guess the picture I've just painted is ultimately these ideas, these situations are being, and there's another term where it's somewhat chimeric. And a chimera ultimately is sort of like similar to what you'd have with um, similar to what you'd have with like a Frankenstein's monster, except it's more like the myths and legends of Greek mythology to do with, like, you got the lion with the snake attached to the tail, and you got like, oh, the minotaur, with the bull head and the horse body. That's kind of like what the chimeric Well, that's what I mean when I say chimeric. So ultimately, what I'm saying is these are somewhat like chimeric narratives. They somewhat mutate over time, and they you don't evolve with them, or you don't know the origins of them, and so they take you to another place that you're not even you don't understand. You're ultimately alienated, and that's the problem, you know. So it's interesting. It's interesting. I'll just give you a bit more context before I give it back to you, Strings. Pontius Pilate, because he said died under. Let me just read the quote. It says, "Christ was born as a real human being, worked many miracles, and suffered his fate. Died under Pontius Pilate." And Pontius Pilate was the governor of the of Judea in the is it 26 to 36 AD. So he was a Roman governor at the time, and ultimately he was the one that governed over the trial of Jesus, and you know gave him the thumbs down. Ultimately, you know, as Undertaker would do. Was it Undertaker? But anyways, and and he's like, "Tag, you're it. You're out of it." Um, so man, this thing, it runs deep, and ultimately, that's why I wanted to bring it to your attention. But I'll give you the floor. Want you to just share your thoughts.
Yeah, that's the whole one mass thing reminds me of what you said as well about how you versus the state. Um, and I take that as my definition of that is like we're all the term we're all you're in your own world, i.e., everyone is in their own universe. You're walking around essentially trying to figure it out. And uh, yeah, there's a war on intelligence right now, and it's very severe. But what you said about I don't want to skip before I forget what you said about the wizard being the state. Ideally, that's um, if one knows how to use if you teach a man how to fish, essentially you know um, enough about fishing enough to teach it. So with that being said, um, if you're teaching people how to fish in order for a sense of control, you will leave out a huge amount of information in order for them to be more free or i.e. sovereign in how to take care of themselves. Um, and why I always mention knowledge is comes with a price because if you do pay it, um, the more understanding you can gain about how to maneuver in your own life's predicaments. Not so much about, a money hack and, you just have this glitch and it still doesn't constitute enough to help save yourself because the statistic is most lottery winners lose their earnings within the first few years of winning. Um, and that always stuck with me because even if you get what you pray for, if you don't have the wisdom to keep it, it's pretty much trickles away from you, so to speak. But with the quote, I've been reading it a lot um, as you were sharing your viewpoints, um, and yeah, let's go into that. Faith is supported by facts. Such a bold statement, and it's very needed um, for that to be addressed, because faith is uh, it's wow, it is a paradox. It really is, because for what works for someone may not work for a next man, but it's all about what works, i.e., building that foundation. So um, it's as if to say, um, the first step is, if you believe in this, what outcome do you get? And let's be real, it's usually something of a physical um, manifestation, and um, it's until one gets a bit more wiser, they start asking for things that aren't exactly physical, and thus it starts to change the relationship and dynamic with what faith is. Uh, I love the saying, God saves his strongest battles for his strongest soldiers. And that always makes me laugh, because it usually pertains to um, see, gaining wisdom from circumstances that are sent to destroy you. And what that usually means is, um, to test your character, for you to extract wisdom in order to help yourself moving forward in life. But the facts part is usually pertained, I feel, to um, a lot of studies from different faiths and cultures trying their best to explain why faith is the pinnacle of man, and i.e., what happens if his faith wavers. It can be shown in many different ways. And it's a recurring thing, because um, simply, if one does not have it, what one seeks, they will struggle to attain. Um, and it makes me think about, um, ooh, I just had it before it went. But nonetheless, um, yeah. So with these different cultures, theologians, historians, psychologists, like we covered last week, Carl Jung, most of their works um, always navigate to this crossroad of, if you cross this bridge, it heavily, so all the, as, and I'm sure they point out, the data heavily suggests that there are forces at play that have a stronger um, hmm, affliction on mankind's journey. And I think we covered karma as well, or we touched on it. And that's always an interesting um, topic to me, because uh, depending on how it's worded, it can be used in a way to monitor how someone acts in their day to day life, thus questioning the facts and opinions with faith and fact. Because in my case, um, if someone is always studying to seek the truth and have a better relationship with it, I've come to find out that one must be flexible enough to bend their relationship with facts and the truth in itself. Because if not, you'll be rigid in your way of thinking, in how you approach anything in life. And that starts to hinder you, because you always feel like logic has to come into the mix. And I feel that is what makes it tricky, because yes, one must be logical, but too much logic, you remove the quality of what makes us human. And by definition, we are uh, spiritual beings. Like, this entire flesh is made from atoms and molecules and things that are directly linked to the periodic table. So if one neglects what kind of influence that may have on you, it starts to cause you start to lose the argument about what type of experience you're here to have. And if most of this life is meant to be built on you believing in that, if you want a good life, and the first step is to think as such, half of the battle is already won in your mind. The rest is how you go about applying the work to support your belief in the outcomes that you want. And it all boils down to the type of person you want to be while accumulating these life experiences, these goals, or these assets, if you will. Um, and I can see here you've added more facts. Knowledge to the myth, or they mythologize the object of their faith while drawing the line quite arbitrarily at the crucial points. Um, and yes, great point. Um, to me, that says uh, there's a great saying: myths are myths exist to explain the complex life journey. Because if you were to take it in full form, one could be one could actually like clock out and turn crazy. That's that's the bottom line. That has been tried and tested since the beginning of man. I feel, because that ability to take in that much context about the human existence, you'll fry your brain. And hence why you said earlier, when um, the notion to make the myths appear real, that's where you start to cause intentional damage, because naturally one will question, what do you mean someone did this and did that, but no one is doing that today? Um, well, the point of that is the knowledge is meant to help you understand the layered context to how that appeals to the human experience. Um, but if one purposely uses logic to disarm what faith is trying to explain, you will always be one step behind, because um, money can only fix problems that are linked with money. So if what does one do with problems with knowledge of self, problems with self-esteem, health? To some degree, there are different um, solutions for different things. But if the mass or the one links it all together and says, well, if you work hard enough and you make this amount, you should feel good about yourself. And if you don't, that's a you problem. Because look at all the examples that will go online and tell you this life is great because I have this, this, and this, until they turn the camera off. Or when someone who's very successful, unfortunately, unalives themselves, the first thing people have said, oh, why were they miserable? They had everything that we were told to have in existence because of that certain thing. So it's like the story of King Midas. Wait, no, wrong king. What's the brother that could turn everything to gold? Yeah, you know the one. Great example. You got the name?
I'm not too sure.
Yeah. I think, is it
I think
King?
I'm sure I forgot that a long time
Right.
ago.
Yeah, Midas touch. That's the phrase that's been coined. A man who had the ability to turn anything into gold. Immediately, it's like bloody hell, mate. I'm, I'm the king of the hill until I assume, I don't know the story well, so please don't quote me, but I would assume as soon as you touch a loved one, you quickly find out that that value that that person had is worth more than gold. So it quickly desensitizes the notion of that myth very quickly that, oh, well, you know, I need to make a lot of use of this gift or ability in order to further my financial advancements. But when it
Just to
comes
say,
to,
yeah, you're right, King Midas.
yeah, thanks. Um, as soon as that comes into question about, oh, well, there's wealth in other things outside of the physical things itself, it starts to help one understand that character is as important, if not more important, than what people have been told to believe or not focus on for a long, long time. So, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. Yeah, you touched on quite a few interesting things. You said war on the state, and I would go a bit deeper than that. I would say war on individualism, perhaps. It's a bit more the way I see it. I keep talking about this big body, the population, this one mind, this one thing, etc. But what happens to the individual at the same time? And this is something that Jung speaks on a lot as well. The individual, you know, all these points that he's making and these things, psychological exploration that he's speaking about, is somewhat highlights the fact that the individual is somewhat slave driven, is indoctrinated to be a slave, a shadow of his former self, because he's stripped of, he's shackled, thereby stripped of the ability to think for himself and be better for himself. But it makes him, at the same time, it makes him a great being, or a great being to be a slave, to do the bidding of somebody else. Ergo, in this case, the narrative that we're talking about is the state. Um, the other thing you said was, the idea of spirituality. And the term you used was atoms from periodic table to somewhat describe, the makeup of our being, properties, etc. But even that, we're talking about spirituality, which is somewhat of a intangible sort of thing, right? But even that, we still have to state facts to speak about. Atoms from periodic table, which is our being, but that's our makeup. But at the same time, can you really say spirituality is a tangible thing in its purest essence?
Yes.
Elaborate, please.
Um, Thoughts become things. A thought isn't intangible until one works up enough energy from the realm, or i.e., where the idea came from, into this reality. That is how everything has come into existence. Different cultures have their own interpretations of where these things are, but one can never argue that an idea is not physical. And that entire relationship between thought turning into things is spiritual in itself. But what along the way, words tend to get tainted and lose their value because of the images and definitions and people that choose to represent it misrepresent it. And that goes for a lot of things. If someone tells me they're religious, a bad experience that I've had in the past, i.e., I would associate it to that bad experience until I'm willing enough to let go of that definition and say, from a positive light or place, it surely means that this is someone who practices a faith and still chooses to represent themselves as a person with integrity, with good character, and to know that there's more to life than just focusing on their spirituality. It's a part of who you are, it's not everything that you are. And I mentioned the periodic table because everything almost on that table is in nature. That is the biggest thing that people or man have left out of the equation.
Mm.
Sun grows food, you can consume the food, thus keeps you going. It's a cycle. If humans were removed out of that cycle of nature, the world would continue to exist. Thus, man having the ability to think and add value to nature, you are a herd, you are a shepherd in a sense, meaning uh, the ability to communicate and build things of a higher scale. There's a sense of respect and responsibility that comes with that. Um, and the notions that come down where again modern times is don't step on a crack because it'll bring bad luck, all come from different ways of interacting with making sure that the things that you are putting your energy into are not tainted by things that could delay the process or make things more difficult for you as you're on your journey. And I think the mix up is always that, oh, if I can't touch it, then it isn't real. And that's where the confusion is and where people purposely want to keep us. Because if the longer we do that, the longer um, it starts to distort even information that might help you bridge the gap. But you know, when you have a gut feeling that feels realer than anything, and what happens if you don't trust it? It backfires. You say, "Oh man, I should have did that," but there was nothing tangible. It was a strong feeling. You didn't put your hand in your gut and grab the thought and say, "Oh, here you are." You know what I mean? But if it feels real enough and you yourself, the owner, the state says this is real, and you can see what happens time and time again, if you don't listen to that, or if you don't follow the thoughts that bring you um, discipline, comfort, a sense of relief from a place that ushers in uh, a sense of safety, then it starts to purposely cause the separation between you and what you feel is real. So, in that sense, that's what I um, have come to believe what tangible is. It's not always about what you can touch, it's about you increasing your level of discernment to know that when you interpret different emotions or thoughts, how do you separate them from what is meant to confuse you and what you can use to then say, okay, if this is a thought, let's put a pin in that and find evidence, knowledge, facts to support it. And
If
when
I could jump in,
it does.
I do agree with what you said. You said the great word discernment,
Hmm.
and it really taps into everything that we're speaking about now in terms of like discern and in this case tangible from intangible. Um, but ultimately, I think when you're speaking about the tangible pertaining to spirituality, that's more tetherings that somewhat is like a beacon that inhabits spirituality. Thereby, the man, I mean, religion is something that can somewhat make you not necessarily by itself, but it's a tethering of spirituality because it somewhat, magnifies, if you will, your spirituality. Inner values or things that magnifies your spirituality, different things of that nature does that. But at the end of the day, you have to discern the fact that it is still intangible
Mm,
reality.
you go to the motherland, they'll show you what's real. Hmm.
Well, again, Switch, with
Yeah.
what you just said, with what
Mm.
you just said, that's exactly what we're speaking about, the discernment of what's real and what's not. It's one thing to say that you kill a chicken and you kind of get you can kind of sacrifice a few goats and stuff, and you can hit my guy over there with some rabies or something like that, and just have him feel a certain type of way. But at the end of the day, it's hard to prove those facts as a fact. Is that hard to prove those as a fact? It's
I
it comes
think.
back to belief
Mm.
a lot of times, and it doesn't necessarily stands in the logical sense when it should somewhat be able to stand in both.
And that's the thing. The argument will always be it's not designed to.
To stand in
Because
both.
yes, because what logic does to a large degree is to bring it down to a human level of understanding, which is why I I'm always open to hearing how people interpret miracles because we're always going to experience things that are of good nature and intention. Um, yeah, actually, that'd be an example. When something good happens to someone with no logical explanation, nine
Mm,
times out of ten, no one is going to want to find a fact for why that happened because it's supporting their journey or in their aid, so to speak. And the example you use is always one that is used to question why that is tangible within itself, and why I always say that science is a very young, um, I want to say, way of teaching because in a sense it's great because it's helped mankind bridge the gap to many things that couldn't be explained, but there's still a lot of catching up to do to how old the universe and this world is. So there are still things at play that we see every day that there's no way of fully understanding or explaining how it works, but we value its use of it, mostly in nature. But the principle in spirituality, which is tied, which I believe the definition is one's relationship to that source that gives them answers to be able to navigate life, especially when you don't know or have an answer for a specific thing. And with that connection to one being cut, that's what's causing the issues that many people are having. And I think it's really cool that we have so many names for different things because who would we be if there was just one word to explain all the amazing things or things that don't make sense existed. But the thoughts becoming things is a principle in that domain where um, you think of something so strongly, you will, and if you look for signs, you will be. It's what's the theory? I think it's the yellow car theory. If you want a car, for example, or I can't remember it exactly, but if you want something and you register it in your mind strongly enough, which that triggers the subconscious, all of a sudden the theory states you start seeing that item or that idea everywhere because now what your subconscious has done has triggered your senses and somewhat discernment for you to see it more clearer, i.e., the object or idea was always available, but because you didn't give it that attention or energy, you never really paid attention to it. So, what that does, it starts to rev up your idea and your belief in that this is somewhat attainable because it's more prevalent in your vision.
I understand, but what you're showing me right now is are examples of disparity,
Mm,
and what I mean by that is, yes, I understand what you're saying, and not to say that I am trying to belittle it or anything like that. But in terms of bridging the gap, you're somewhat distancing things with your argument because it's hard to decipher. Well, it's not hard. You're kind of like it's too it's becoming more distant the more I hear what you have to say, and there's a disparity with the just listen to what you're saying, just in the
mhm.
sense of um, which is what Young was pretty much trying to speak about, because instead of bridging it together, it's distancing further apart, which is usually a sign where things don't necessarily add up because the two should somewhat be harmonious. And what I'm speaking about is the facts and the faith, which obviously is the intangible in this case, but in this case, the spiritual and the body, or or the environment sort of thing, or the body with the spirit. So that's where I have the issue. It's not necessarily clicking or bridging the gap. Ultimately, eradicating the disparity between the two, which is the issue. So I guess maybe you sort of kind of exacerbate the situation a little bit from what you said. But I hear you. I hear you. But it's interesting, strings, man. You know.
It really is. But I still stand on the notion that
I know you do, and you
yeah,
should.
no, for real.
You should.
And I think the bridge is it will always be up for interpretation, and I think that's what makes this existence what it is for every individual to have their own relationship with it. And um, I will always refer to ancient texts because if someone was living life at a different time, the argument is that they had more time and they were set up in a societal construct to have at way more of a lifestyle to ask these questions and really spend a large portion of time trialing and testing and seeing what other people think about how to
Mm,
interpret why we're here, how our relationship is with nature, these forces, gravity, and the human will, so to speak.
Yeah.
Um, but one thing that is always trial and tested is what you said about the Wizard of Oz and the witch um, pulling the strings in society. There's very large evidence that supports that. In order to do the things that they do, mind control,
Mm,
etc., a large portion of it that they get that information is from um, these texts, these cultures that heavily invested their time, money, and resources into trying to understand how these things work. Because, i.e., if it hasn't been done before, then where would you get the foundation or the support to be able to know how to execute it in today's day and age? Because experiments and etc. could only take you so far, and that's why they do it so well with tactics and psychology. It all comes from a place that supports how to um, have a grip on the human mind and body to know what to do to really encourage these spiritual issues that people are suffering from. And if you are able to encourage it and speed it up, which thus increases the amount of um, autism to anxiety and these different things, then surely where would the solutions come from to be able to reverse it? It must somewhat be in the things that they're doing. What's the saying? Um, if you know how to give, basically what I'm trying to say is that if you know how to give someone poison, you must have the cure, or you must know how to create a cure. So it comes from the same um, pipeline, so to speak.
I understand. I understand. My only thing is, you must be able to kind of decipher things and be consistent. I think the issue here is consistency. What is faith and symbolism should remain that, even if it's mixed with facts. Those two should be able to go together and still coincide and have balance. But I think that's the issue we have in society today. And I would imagine this is something that's it's been an issue for a long time. But I hear you. I appreciate that. Strings, any last anything before we go? Just gonna wrap up soon.
Take the leap.
Right?
I think that's what the bridge is. Take the leap.
I'm with you. All right, everyone. That's it for tonight. We're planning to do a few more for the week, so um, stay tuned and definitely, this is something that we're going to multiply these live nights. And
Yes.
once in a while, we might, have a few guests here and there, but that's the near future. We just want to, be consistent for a little bit. Right. Thanks everyone for listening, and till next time, I am the Mad Poet, Mr. Strings Theory. Check his
Thank you.
channel out, and yeah. Until next time, take
Take
care.
care, everyone.